Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Development Control meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of the room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Members, please note this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. And if everybody could turn their phones off or put them on silent. Thank you. For the benefit of members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I would like to explain who everyone is. My name is Councillor Nick Robinson and I am Chairman of this committee. To my right are councillors who will be making decisions on the applications on this evening's agenda. To my immediate right and left are officers who will be presenting the applications and providing advice to the committee. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers, examining the evidence brought before us tonight, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting in the order set out in the update paper. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to keep points made on the application on material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. May I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and keep any comments on each planning application to a maximum of 4 minutes. This evening there are 9 applications on the agenda and I hope to be finished by 9 o'clock. I understand that planning can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout this meeting. Thank you. Item 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. As far as I'm aware, we've got a full set tonight. Good. Number 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, regarding item 7 on the agenda on page 199, I'm quoted as saying I don't see how this application, etc. I'd like to point out that the officer contacted me on the 15th of December to say that this application was up for refusal because of the fence. And I, on reflection, looked back at what we did at the committee and was making the point there were other issues that this committee rejected that application on. And so I posed the question, how did this application differ from the previous one? And that was one line in it, as opposed to the whole communication. So I just wanted to point out, this may look as if I was predetermined against the application as opposed to the fact I was just seeking clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner. Are there any others? No, thank you very much. Urgent matters, I have none. Mike? No, good, thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of January. Could I have a proposer? Councillor Court and seconder, Councillor McCormick. Thank you. I will sign those at the end of the meeting. Applications for planning. Number 1, land east of Ash Park, Business Centre, Ash Lane, Little London, Bramley. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the installation of a battery storage facility and ancillary development on land east of Ash Park Business Park. The site's area is 2.9 hectares and the proposal is for the installation of a 57 megawatt battery storage facility. If I can draw your attention to the update paper. Members viewed the site last Friday and notes from the viewing panel on the update. There were some comments raised at the viewing with regards to noise. So there's some additional information and points of clarification in terms of noise on the site. Noise impact assessment was submitted, and that's been fully considered by the Environmental Health Officer, and they've raised no objection, subject to a condition, to ensure that the mitigation within that report is followed through. I'd also then draw your attention on the update paper. Last week there was an appeal decision on another battery storage facility at Minchin's Lane, and that was allowed on appeal. So there's summary points there in terms of some of the points that the inspector made with regards to landscape character, the impact on the loss of the agricultural land and various things like that. The applicant has also made some comments in terms of the recent appeal decision and the need for another facility in the area. And then we've also got some further information with regards to fire risk. A fire risk management plan was submitted, and that's been considered by Hampshire Fire and Rescue, and they've raised no objection to it. And then if I just draw your attention as well to some minor changes to the conditions, and those are listed at the end of the update report for this application. The applicant has also agreed to any pre-commencement conditions, so that needed clarifying on the update paper. And the officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Sue. If we could have our first speakers, which is Tom Roseblade, Luke Rogers and Greg Adamson. The chairs are there for you. Good evening, gentlemen. You have 4 minutes between you, and we will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. And the microphone button is, I think it's the right-hand one, and it'll light up red. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and for the officer's presentation, setting out the advantages of the scheme and in reaching the recommendation for approval. This development is all about UK energy security, a greener economy, keeping consumer bills down and supporting the transition to the zero carbon energy network that is required to tackle climate change and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Both the Conservative government and National Grid recognise that battery storage is critical to achieving a net zero electricity system. Batteries are able to store excess electricity generated by renewable energy facilities when demand is low and release that energy to the grid at periods of high demand. A good example of this is solar, which generates its peak output at the middle of the day, whilst peak demand is generally in the evening. National Grid must balance supply and demand of power on the grid, and battery facilities like this one will be available for National Grid to call on to provide balancing services. Without these services, there will be blackouts in electricity supply in the future. As of 2021, there was 1.6 gigawatts of battery storage operational in the UK, but National Grid forecasts it will require 20 gigawatts by 2030 in order to support the energy transition to renewables and keep the lights on. This is why battery storage facilities are receiving such strong policy support at national policy level. The Bramley substation is a strategically important part of the National Grid transmission network that has the size and type of capacity required to accommodate grid-scale energy storage projects. National Grid itself has identified Bramley as a substation of key importance and an area which requires grid stability support. It is also the only unconstrained grid supply point in Basingstoke and Deane. The planning inspector for the nearby Minchin's Lane site, which has recently been allowed as appeal, noted as much, giving substantial weight to the locational factors that influence the siting of battery storage facilities. Allowing the Minchin's Lane development does not in any way diminish the overwhelming need for this development as well. Bramley substation is one of the few places regionally that has capacity for further energy storage connections, and this capacity must be utilised. As of September 2022, Basingstoke and Deane had 1 megawatt of operational storage. The recently approved Minchin's Lane scheme will add 100 megawatts of capacity, while the proposed development here would add an additional 57 megawatts of capacity. Taken together, these schemes would provide just 0.8% of the required 20 gigawatts of storage, so there is no question that both schemes are required. Furthermore, this is an opportunity for Basingstoke and Deane to demonstrate its serious commitment to its climate change targets, having declared a climate emergency in September 2019. This declaration was followed with a clear target to achieve a net zero carbon borough by 2030, just 7 years from now, in recognition of the significant impact that climate change will have on future generations.
You have 1 minute remaining.
The applicant has sought to mitigate potential adverse harm associated with the development by locating the facility away from local residents and through co-location with the Ash Park Business Centre, making use of the existing access from the public highway, the same dark green colour palette to structures, and proposing planted bunds as effective screening and to form a robust edge to the development site in the business park. This positioning in relation to the existing commercial land use limits the overall harm on the landscape, views and local amenity. And we believe this is an important factor in why the scheme has received no individual objections from local residents or members of the public. On balance, substantial weight should be given to the need for storage development in the context of net zero, and the applicant and your officers consider that this clearly outweighs the harm. The proposed development is essential infrastructure necessary for keeping the lights on, and I would urge you to support your officer's recommendation and approve the application without delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Could turn your microphone off, please. Thank you. Questions for the speakers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. A couple of things, if I may. In your opening comments, you said this will reduce consumer bills. Could you explain how, please?
Good evening. Proliferation of renewables onto the grid is essential, not only for climate change targets, but also to support the reduction in energy costs to consumers. The way that is done is through the lowering of the levelised cost of energy in the national energy mix. Renewables are proven to generate their electricity at a lower level than, at a lower cost to consumers than fossil fuels. The current high prices that are seen in the electricity market are purely the result of gas setting the marginal price in the electricity market, so setting the wholesale cost of electricity. Batteries are critical in supporting new renewable energy coming onto the grid. The intermittent nature of renewable energy means that energy must be stored and provided to customers when they require it, not when it's generated. And that's exactly what this battery storage facility is designed to do. Store energy, provide it to consumers when it's needed. In addition to that, this battery storage facility would also provide crucial balancing services to the national grid. Without those balancing services, we do risk blackout events occurring on the grid, where national grid cannot balance the demand and supply and cannot maintain the frequency on the grid. Thank you.
Is it okay if I just add a point to that as well? Yeah. It also comes down to something called curtailment, which is when the supply of electricity from renewable energy such as wind or solar is greater than the demand for that electricity from consumers. So at the moment, the national grid pays the producers of this energy to switch off their systems rather than risk overloading and tripping the network. And this electricity is wasted. However, the costs for paying those producers are borne through this curtailment and passed back to customers through their energy bills. And the National Grid forecasts that levels of curtailment will grow fourfold by 2030, with costs back to customers expected to reach £2.5 billion per year.
Any more questions for the speakers? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Approximately how many homes is this facility intended to serve? You mentioned it's going to be putting energy back into the national grid, but approximately how many homes will this serve?
As the facility isn't a generator, it's very difficult to quantify that because it isn't producing electricity in that way. It's storing it and releasing it back, and that responds to demand at times as required by the national grid to provide that energy back. And so on some days, it's a 57 megawatt facility, it may provide 25-50% of that energy back to the grid as required. On other days it might give more back. It's difficult to put a precise number on homes in the same way that you can for, say, solar facilities or wind facilities.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. My second point was you then towards the end of your statement you suggested this will help the borough achieve net zero targets. Could you give us some sort of explanation on how you see that would help us, please?
It's about the transition to a zero carbon energy network and ensuring that residents in the area have access to electricity in the future, and that electricity is keeping the lights on, and as we move to provide those residents with renewable energy, which will be required in wind and solar and other forms of renewable energy, these energy storage systems are essential to supporting those generating facilities. And so if you're transitioning to a net zero carbon network and becoming a net zero borough, and the electricity and energy system is a key part of that, then these energy storage facilities are required.
Any more questions? Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. What is the life of these batteries? We all stick batteries in torches and everything else, and we have no idea how they last. I just want to know, is this facility able to be upgraded as storage improves? Because obviously things have moved on in the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And that's absolutely the case, that this facility is capable of being upgraded in the future as technology moves forward. So the initial installation of batteries are warranted by the manufacturer to last for 10 years. We actually expect that the batteries will last between 10 and 15 years. And in that time frame, the batteries will be recommissioned, recycled, and new batteries will be installed. If there is an improvement in technology in that intervening period, then the scheme will take advantage of that new battery technology, improving efficiency, hopefully, improving support to the grid. The scheme itself has a lease over the land for a 40-year term, so that would be the longest that the scheme would be in play.
Turn your microphone off, please. Thank you. Any more questions? No? Thank you very much, gentlemen. If you could return to your previous seats. Questions to officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. In our update paper, in fact, the very last paragraph on, can't tell you a page, sorry. Anyway, it suggests that if the base of the hard standing for the containers would, in the likelihood, be required to be not the the loose gravel that it is now, and better for drainage, surface, etc. What is a Section 96A application? Is it something we ask the applicant to do, or the applicant says it would like to do it? Thank you.
It's just a minor application for amendments that would come in. So if they choose to change those bits, potentially if there's a change in the regulations, then they can come in with a minor amendment application. So it comes to us. It's just a procedural thing. That's all that they would do. That's how they would change it.
So just on that then, if we saw the regulation, could we enforce that that change was made in like the reverse situation?
We can't predict how the regulations are going to change, so we can't anticipate that. If they need to change it because the regulations change, then that's the route that they can use through the planning system to amend the scheme.
Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask officers what the next stage after this this meeting is. I've already outlined a few issues with containment in case of fire and emergency services having to deal with that fire, liquid, toxic materials being mixed, going into the ground. I don't see that being addressed, and I think bringing the fire brigade, and I'm a bit disappointed that they've not addressed it, to be honest, but that is a potential issue, especially if you've got water courses there. That's going to be toxic materials going into the ground. So I'd just like to know how that's been dealt with after this stage.
Those types of things are dealt with outside of the planning system. We can't control those elements. I mean, there's elements of building regulations that they would have to meet. There's also other fire and safety standards that they'd have to meet, and potentially the change in the legislation that could be going through, that equally will pick up elements like that as well. But it's something that sits outside the planning system. So from our point of view, if it's approved tonight, then the decision goes out, and then purely from a planning point of view, they would then be going through dealing with the pre-commencement conditions and submitting information that way.
I was just wondering if we could make a statement just to say we have concerns in those areas, and could they be addressed in the next stage, development, planning regs or whatever.
Thank you, Councillor Gaskell. So I think the way that we've approached these applications since the last version that came forward, which was, you may recall, was one in Old Basing, for all these types of applications now, we seek the applicants to submit a fire safety plan as part of the application, which has been done on this occasion, and then obviously increase the consultation with Hampshire Fire and Rescue. I appreciate that beyond that, there might be some ongoing concerns in councillors' minds. The only thing I could suggest would be an informative note to effectively record that, you know, if that's the view of the committee, obviously, the informative note to record the committee's encouragement for that continuing dialogue with Hampshire Fire and Rescue throughout the entire process, which, as I say, would be covered through the other legislation anyway, but it's something that could be recorded through that informative note.
I'd be very happy with that.
Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Tomley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just very quickly, officers, I've read the update, okay, before this meeting started, but I must have missed something because the noise levels aren't quite clear, okay? Could you please just, beyond all reasonable doubt, okay, clarify exactly what the noise levels are going to be for this establishment? Thank you.
Right, I mean, basically, within the battery storage facility, you've got various bits of machinery, and they all have different noise levels. But as it says in here, the highest level that would potentially happen, the peak one, would be 78 decibels. But there's other equipment there which has a lower noise level. There would be a 3-metre acoustic fence that would go round the site, and that's part of the mitigation measures. So the environmental health have considered all of the various noises generated by the machinery, all the different bits of machinery, and then also the closest receptors. So bearing in mind the business park is a commercial entity, so that wouldn't come into it. So you're looking at the nearest residential ones. And with the mitigation that they're proposing, then it will bring the levels down to an acceptable background noise, so the environmental health are quite happy with the proposals that they've got on there. So there's various different bits of machinery. I haven't got them in detail, but they're all within the noise impact assessment. They list all the different noise levels that each bit of machinery will make.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to Councillor Gaskell's point, looking at the letter that is on our web, the response from the fire brigade, it says in one of the paragraphs that, I'll praise it, basically if they consider the risk of harm to the local water environment from a contaminated fire water runoff, they'll just let the thing burn. And it says, it is strongly recommended that all reasonable measures to be taken to lower the risk of contamination to the local water environment and enable an effective firefighting response. And in the planning statement from the applicant, it actually says in section 3.2.10 that the compound would be surfaced with uncompacted stone. Now, those two things together, I would have hoped that we might have picked this up and actually questioned the applicant about the potential conflict between what the fire brigade are saying and what they're actually offering, so that members tonight would have seen that actually that would be a problem that's been already eradicated. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? In that case, debate. If there is no debate, I will move. Councillor Rattigan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, there is no doubt that this no sighting of a battery storage meets everybody's approval. But it is, in my view, a scrappy, worthless piece of ground in terms of agriculture. You wouldn't be growing wheat or barley in it. It is certainly abuts a business park. It meets the standards, and I think many of our residents wouldn't thank us if we didn't pass this and they sat in the dark for a period of time because we hadn't made full use of the opportunities to have battery storage within this borough. It isn't perfect, and I do hope that as legislation changes and our own MP is trying to improve the fire regulations that surround it, and the facility can be upgraded and will be upgraded as time goes by. My view of where people will be impacted is along the walkway, but it is only over a short period of time and does not, in my view, impact the whole of that Bramley walk, as was pointed out by Councillor Tomlin when we were on the site. I have to agree with officers, and in light of the latest appeal decision, I'm happy to move the approved application.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bowes. Thank you. Moved and seconded for approval. Would you like the informative that Councillor Gaskell? Yeah, with the informative.
I would be grateful for that, and I think Paul would be.
Moved and seconded for approval with the informative as suggested by Councillor Gaskell. Those in favour? That is everybody. Sorry?
It's not It's Councillor Tomlin,
All right. And those against? One, Councillor Tomlin. Thank you. That is approved. Sue, could you confirm, please?
Thank you, Chair. That the application be approved subject to the amended conditions as listed in the update paper and the additional informative as requested by the committee.
Thank you very much. And item number 2, land to the rear of 20 and 20A Hill Road, Oakley. Bethan.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a full planning application at land to the rear of 2021 Hill Road in Oakley for the erection of a 2-bedroom detached dwelling. The dwelling would be served by an existing access which is used by the elms to the east and is a pedestrian and cycle path for the Beech Tree Close development. Since the agenda, the Parish Council have reinforced their comments back in 2019 relating to overdevelopment, impact on neighbours and around the access due to the visibility displays, and that it's used by pedestrians and cyclists. These have all been covered within the report. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions listed at the end of the report in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethan. If we could have our first speaker, which is Mr. Rowley. Good evening, Mr. Rowley. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Buttons on the mic on. You found it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. My name is Alex Rowley, and I'm speaking today as a resident from the neighbouring Poets Meadow development or Beech Tree Close. I've submitted a detailed response regarding this application with my concerns. Tonight, I'd like to respond to the officer's report and highlight some points for you during your debate. From page 86, I'd like to highlight Councillor Taylor's reasons for bringing this application to DCC, as I share these concerns. I'd like the completion of the Poets Meadow development as previously agreed with a safe pedestrian and cycle route to Barn Lane. To quote Councillor Taylor, the arrival of a housing estate to the rear of Barn Lane with the access pathway intended as a safe pedestrian cycle route for residents makes the access for this dwelling less, not more acceptable in terms of safety. From page 88, bullet point 4 states it's an agreed pedestrian route. It is also a cycle and emergency access route as well. And Howie's lack of objection is a concern given 2 previous applications of the site, so I ask why the change. Also from page 88, character of the area is fundamentally altered. What does this statement mean in planning terms? If anything, as Councillor Taylor identified in the referral to DCC, surely this would be a further negative to the application, as it should now be a pedestrian and cycle route. From page 91, in the second paragraph, it's mentioned that the site is borderline overdevelopment. Would this still be borderline overdevelopment if the blue line had been added on the location plan to confirm the ownership of the neighbouring land, as recommended on gov.uk for making application? The applicant mentioned at the site visit they own the land behind, the applicant's agent mentioned at the site visit they own the land behind and the garden fence can be moved if necessary. The wider site already has 20 and then 20A added to it. Is a third property on this land sustainable development? Also from page 91, third paragraph, this goes into more detail about the fundamental alterations to the character of the area mentioned previously. It's stated there is a dense urban development to the west. Having lived in urban developments, I strongly disagree with this assessment and believe any weight attributed to this should be removed. The development is not a dense urban nature, particularly in the northern area, and I believe a planning inspector would also agree with this, as this was considered due to parts of the development being in the conservation area. Paragraph 96 of the appeal decision for that application states, the northern field, which is closest to the historic core of the village, would be retained primarily as open space. The layout of the houses would have spacious and informal character with a variety of building types. So I ask, how is that a dense urban nature? From page 93, paragraph 2, visibility onto Barn Lane is a concern for residents in the area, and I believe the track was deemed unsuitable for permanent vehicle access as part of the assessments for Poets Meadow. A plan for the track is provided on page 106 of your reports. Paragraph 3 states that the previous development was refused for increased use of the track, and these refusals predate the local plan and the supplementary guidance which now should be considered. The report does not provide information as to what new additional guidance now suggests the track, with appropriate blue signage for a pedestrian and cycle track, is now suitable for increased permanent vehicle use.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. How a vehicle's visibility display is now suddenly suitable when twice confirmed by HCC as not suitable? What other changed policies negate the unsuitability of the track? Planning history is a material consideration when determining applications, so this should be taken into account. Paragraph 4, as mentioned earlier, I'd like to clarify it's a pedestrian and cycle route, and not just a pedestrian as mentioned in the report. Its creation was given weight in the appeal for reasons for Poets Meadow. It should not be used for parking vehicles, as the report says, as these should be on the side of the track to keep the track clear for emergency vehicles. The fact vehicles have been parked there has actually prevented the developers completing the work in breach of the S106 agreement, to which the applicant, I believe, was a party. If the committee has managed to approve this new application, these issues should be addressed prior to commencement of development and the pedestrian and cycle route completed and maintained during construction with an appropriate construction management strategy supplied first. Page 106, the retained access rights mentioned on the plan are 20 and 20A, not 20 and 21 as in the report, and these two properties are on Hill Road. Should this application be approved, it will be actually removing access right for those properties, since a new dwelling will be there instead. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Rowley? No? Thank you very much. Could you turn the microphone off? Thank you. And if we could have Mr. Cobbold, please. Good evening, Mr. Cobbold. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chairman. Let's start with talking you through this plan we've got in front of us, actually. I think that's quite an important consideration. This is the access which we've just heard from the local resident. It's a long-established access. It used to provide access to 2 properties. One of those properties has now been demolished, subsumed into the big development for 85 houses to the west. So by creating a second dwelling off it, it's not actually intensifying the use or the historic use, which has already had 2 or always had 2 dwellings off it historically. So there's no intensification there. So let's get that one clear, and then let's talk about the requirements under this planning application, this 2014 planning application for the 85 houses. Yeah, agreed. It was an unsuitable access for 85 houses. That's very different and a different scale of development to what we're talking about here. They deliberately kept it open for vehicles for the existing property, which the councillors saw on site the other day, and they deliberately kept vehicle access right up to where you can see, I'm trying to describe it, where the dark grey lines finish, and they said that's where the vehicle access stops. So in other words, to the west of the application site. So the access goes all the way up and beyond the front of the application site with full vehicle rights over it. I've checked the 106 agreement. There's nothing to say that those vehicle rights change. The applicant benefits from those rights. There's no planning issue or no planning reason to refuse the application based on what was committed to during that application. Hopefully that clarifies that. I'll just talk more generally about the character of the area, which is the second issue we've heard. I was going to say I've got an application which doesn't need to mention the 5-year land supply, but I think I'm going to have to because of the reason why the 85 to the west were approved. And that's the benefit of this application having taken so long in the system while nitrates mitigation has been sorted. That development is now there when it wasn't 4 years ago when it was submitted. It's a development which fundamentally changes the character of the area. It puts 85 houses onto what was a green field. I remember it well. So the character of the area has changed. It subsumes the application site into the urban area, and that changes the context of the consideration for the proposed development. I don't think the dwelling is out of character because it's very similar and it's been designed to reflect the house 2 doors to, or 1 door to the east, to the right on that plan. That is the design basis for the application. It's not squeezed in any more than that is. It's fully in character of the area because that is part of the character of the area on the neighbouring plot. So I think after 4 years in the system, everything has come out in favour, and it would be good to finally get a planning permission. Thank you.
You should turn the microphone off, please. Questions for Mr. Cobbold? No, thank you very much. Questions to officers? No. Debate. Councillor Gaskell.
Sorry, Chair, there was a reading from Councillor Taylor. I don't know if we're going to consider that.
As Councillor Gaskell has just kindly reminded me, Councillor Taylor asked me to read this out. She said, I'm in full agreement with the comments made by the Parish Council. This proposal would lead to a cramped and incongruous development and should be refused for the same reasons as the previous application on the same site. Those reasons were cramped development, harmful to the character of the area, inadequate visibility space causing undue interference with the safety of the highway users. Note there are now many more highway users of the highway with a large development now built. In addition, the driveway from Barn Lane is a cycle pedestrian access to the Poets Meadow development, having been deemed unsuitable as a vehicular access. This is the worst kind of backland development, simply squeezing in houses in bits of back garden. It does nothing to enhance the character of the area, which has already seen a great deal of unwanted change. And that's Councillor Diane Taylor. Thank you for reminding me of that. Obviously we can't question Councillor Taylor on that, so questions to officers? No? Debate? If there is no debate, Councillor Frost, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that I've really struggled with this one because I think it is cramped. I think it is squeezing a house onto a site. However, the fact that Beech Trees Estate has been built, and it's something that when I was first elected as a councillor, okay, I did campaign against, and unfortunately we lost the final challenge on Beech Trees, but it has fundamentally changed the the whole area there. Okay, I think it's changed it for the worse. Okay, but I'm not a professional planner. So whilst I can see Councillor Taylor's perspective and point of view, okay, it is cramped, but I understand from planners that it is perfectly acceptable to have a garden of that size and a house of that size on that plot. So I am really struggling to actually see how we can actually refuse this, okay, purely on planning grounds. And therefore, I'm very reluctant to actually do this to the residents of Oakley, but I have to say that I can't refuse this, and so I have to propose it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's difficult, this one. I mean, one of the key paragraphs there on page 91, borderline overdevelopment. Unfortunately, these are the things that appeals are made of, and I can't see any policies that would stand up to scrutiny by the inspector, so I'll be reluctantly seconding this.
Thank you. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is that one? Can you keep your hands up a minute? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 with me. Yeah. And those against? 1. And abstentions? 3. Thank you. That is approved. Bethan.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is approved as per the officer's recommendation, subject to conditions listed at the end of the report in the agenda paper. Thank you.
Item 3, 7 St John's Peace, Oakley. Bethan again.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a full planning application at land to the rear of 7 St John's Peace in Oakley for the erection of a 2-bed detached bungalow. The new dwelling will be accessed through creating a sideway to the creating a driveway to the side of number 7 by removing the existing garage. Parking for the existing dwelling would then be provided at the rear of its property. There are no updates since the preparation of the agenda. The application is recommended for refusal as it is considered that the development does not respond to the character of the area by virtue of its siting on backland. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could have our speakers, please, Mr Runcie and Mr Froud. Good evening to you both. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
I'll go first. Good evening. My name is Alan Froud. I'm the applicant and owner of 7 St John's Peace, and I just want to really try and give you a bit of background history and sort of motivation of why we put this application in. We moved into the property just over 7 years ago with the intention of doing something with the outbuilding, current outbuilding. Whether that be a garden room, gym, office, something, we had grand ideas for it. Moving on a few years, and we found we weren't actually using this part of the garden, and decided to put up a temporary fence and gate, which is what everyone saw on Friday. We then noticed a lot of houses within Oakley starting to develop their gardens either to the side or to the back, notably 17 Sandfoyne Lane, which is just over Hill Road from us. We approached the same architects and decided to submit an application. Our brief to Martin was we wanted something sustainable, eco-friendly family house that would have low impact on the environment. It also had to be in keeping with the current outbuilding, so it had to be a bungalow with a wooden exterior, and it had to be sympathetic and considerate to our neighbours. We were delighted with the design that Martin came up with. I believe we've submitted a design that improves and enhances the street. This is compounded by the amount of objections we've had. And we've also received support from the Parish Council and Ward Councillor Di Taylor. So I ask the committee please to approve this application.
Yes, just to reiterate what Alan said, as the site lies within the settlement boundary, the principle of development is accepted, and we believe the proposal accords with local and national policy. The local ward member has brought the application before you as they can see the potential for development and is supportive of the proposal to build a bungalow, stating in their correspondence that there is an identified need for such properties in Oakley. The only reason put forward by the case officer for the refusal is the siting of the proposed building and the impact on the character of the area. There has been only one objection from a neighbour, with all matters having been addressed in the officer's report. There have been no objections from the Highway Authority, Landscape Officer, Tree Officer, Ecology, Natural England or the Parish Council. In our opinion, the site is suitable for development, as the members will have encountered on the visit last week. Even in an overgrown state and with the existing outbuilding still occupying much of the site, the plot is of a considerable size. The land slopes down from the garage to the rear and is well screened by existing mature trees and hedgerows. The proposal is to erect a modest bungalow in the rear garden, accessed by extending the driveway. This form of backland development is not uncommon, and there are numerous examples of similar developments within our borough. The previous application put before you that was recommended for approval should be considered. That has just been completed at 17 Same Farm Lane.
You have 1 minute remaining.
The 2-unit scheme approved last month by the committee in Pardown are all similar schemes. We do not agree that there will be an adverse impact on the character of the area. The bungalow will sit approximately 1 metre below the neighbouring properties due to the low level of the site and screened by the established hedgerow and mature trees, making the development virtually hidden. This view is supported in the report by the officer, which states, "It is noted that the bungalow design and lowered ground levels would have a lesser impact when viewed from the street scene. As mentioned by the applicant, the building is to be low energy, high insulation, using an air source heat pump, photovoltaics, rainwater harvesting, mechanical heat recovery. The building is to be of a timber frame, using timber cladding from a sustainable source. The plot of land offers the applicant a unique opportunity to build his family a modest home in a sustainable location. The proposal makes an efficient use of land within the settlement and meets all local and national policies. In addition to meeting an identified need from the Parish Council for 2-bedroom properties and bungalows."
Can I ask you to wind up, please?
That's fine. Thank you.
And if you could turn your microphone off. Thank you. Questions for the speakers? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm, you mentioned a precedent case in Sandfoyne Lane. Was that number 17 you would mention? Thank you. Yeah.
Any more questions? No, thank you. Once again, we have a missive from Councillor Taylor. And she says, "I would like to express my support for this application for the following reasons. The site is not just the end of a back garden, as are so many backland developments. It is an extra piece of land attached to the rear garden of 7 St John's Peace, creating a discrete area for the development, but retaining a good-sized garden for the main house. The proposed building is a modest 2-bedroom bungalow. There has only been one objection to this proposal. Adjacent properties will be shielded by trees and vegetation, and in addition, the proposal dwelling is of low height and will not cause any overlooking. There will be no adverse effect on the street scene from either St John's Peace or Hill Road, and little impact on the landscape character or visual amenity as confirmed by the landscape team. There is an existing sizable structure on the land already. There is a clear and expressed need for bungalow accommodation in Oakley. I would suggest that reasons for approval should be similar to those listed at the last meeting, approving 21-03304 full. A similar proposal in Pardown. The main policies are NPPF SD1, mitigation against the overall shortfall of supply. The development would not cause an undue loss of privacy or cause undue overlooking, overshadowing, overbearing or noise and disturbance impacts to neighbouring properties, and as such complies with policies EM10, EM12 of the local plan. The development would not cause any adverse impact on the highway safety, complying with NPPF policies and CN9 and EM10 of the local plan. And that's from Councillor Diane Taylor. So, questions to officers? Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Freeman, followed by Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to look at the height of the development, please, against the neighbouring development. Could officers please just talk it through, because it looks on site section 2 that it's a lot lower. Okay, but I'd like to just try and understand exactly how much lower. Thank you.
So the land is dip, and it's the height of the dwelling will be 4.4 metres in height. So we have noted in the character of the area section on page that it will have limited views through the access, but the presence of this is on 114, page 114. But it will have the presence that there is development behind, which obviously along St John's piece there isn't any backland development. So, and there'll be the presence of the driveway, so it won't be massively visible, but part of the roof form will be. If you can see in that drawing, you can see where the ridge height is of the existing dwelling in black and white outlined, and the dwelling. So it will sit about there. You can see. Okay.
Councillor Freeman.
Bit of an awkward one. I don't actually disagree. I don't actually agree with the reasons for refusal, because I don't think it would be incongruous. I think it would be fine. My issues is with the access. So if I still think it should be refused, but not for the reasons listed in the report, how do we go about that?
So that's okay. Do you want?
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. So effectively, in considering the item, the committee can either accept the recommendation or overturn it in the event of an approval, or if you disagree with the reason for refusal but want to motion it for a different reason, then that's before you as well in terms of making that decision.
Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if we could see on a map where 17 Sandfoyne Lane was in relation to the...
It's not. It's a couple of roads along, but there is a different character. It's more on the rural edge of the village rather than in the St John's Piece area, which is more central. It's on the edge. It's down a rural lane, so it's quite characterfully different to this site.
Right.
Where there's sort of sporadic development.
I can look it up on Google Maps,
yeah.
But the actual location, the number. And
There was another development of backland approved nearby it as well. I did deal with that application too. So.
Right.
Any more questions for the officers? I've got one, which is the pedestrian accesses to the host dwelling. Are they screened or shielded would be a better word, from the vehicle movements that will be going up and down the driveway at the side? I think there is, if I remember rightly, is there a wall between the two?
Yeah, so it will be going flush from where that wall is. There will be the windows there, but there is about 3.4 metres when I measured it. We have approved other accesses that are that slim, so I took the view that it was okay.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, any more questions? Okay, it's debate. Councillor Freeman.
As I said before, I don't think it would be a problem. My issue is the access, because I don't think that's a suitable access, especially where we saw the back door that would lead straight onto where the cars are coming down. I don't think it's safe. So this is my issue. I've got no issues with the actual building itself, because I think it's fine. The design is fine. I don't think it's going to intrude on anybody, and we have seen this sort of development in the area before. But my issue is with that access and the back door where it leads straight out onto where the cars would be coming down. I don't think it's safe. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Councillor Rattigan, followed by McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the principle, as Councillor Freeman has just indicated, of bungalows on this site, yes, I couldn't disagree with Councillor Taylor on. I think there is a need for bungalow accommodation within the borough. My issues are about safety. I think, frankly, it is not safe. There is not a definable way that you could walk up between the existing house and the road with a car coming down. It would mean one has priority over the pedestrian, and I think that's unsafe. And fundamentally, we should not be approving things that are unsafe in the view of this committee. And I didn't feel comfortable, and therefore I would be happy to move the recommendation as it sits.
Thank you. It's been moved as per the officer recommendation. Mike, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to clarify in terms of Councillor Rattigan moving the recommendation. You mentioned it as sits, so that would mean just taking forward the reason for refusal on the papers and not in relation to, you mentioned concerns about access. So I just want to clarify whether you meant move the recommendation as is, or you mean move the recommendation on the basis, make a motion in relation to the access.
I'm happy with the reason for refusal, but I would like also that we do not feel as a committee that this would provide safe pedestrian movement within the site.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McCormack, followed by Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think Councillor Diane Taylor's hit the nail on the head, actually. I do have some questions in the back of my mind about access, but putting forward reasons for refusal of road safety, we've been here before with other applications. Unless we've got something that's actually held out by the highways people, we have limited chance of success in moving refusal on those grounds and it not being overturned at appeal. But I'm quite happy in the event that we don't have this recommendation moved to move approval on the grounds outlined by Councillor Diane Taylor that it is actually compliant with policy EM10 and EM12 for the local plan.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that having been basically the ward councillor for Oakley for a long time before Kingsclear, there's a lot of development that is like this through, not just Sangford Lane, but, throughout the whole village. Okay, I like the fact that it's the roof is, the ridge line is lower than the surrounding area. Okay, so therefore there's not going to be any undue loss of privacy for any of the neighbours. And should the motion that's currently on the table fail, I will be happy to second Councillor McCormack's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little bit confused with the access issue. My understanding is that the garage is going to come down, so the drive as it is, I don't know if we can go back to the photograph of the front of the property. So that garage with a white door behind the car is going to come down, so the access is where the car is and the path to the side as well. That's been retained, but still with the car you can see that a pedestrian could walk past the car.
That's not.
Could officers please explain the situation?
That garage will be removed, and the wall that you see to the side of the car that's the closest pinch point. That garage will be removed, and I think there's a bit underneath that will be retained as well, and then it will jut back outwards. So that's the closest point of the access.
So will the access to the existing house be down that lane, or will it be enclosed? Will it be coming onto that lane?
Their front door is, as you see it there. They do have access from the garage to the property from memory when I went there, and they've got rear patio back doors as well, if that clarifies that.
Okay, I mean, as a discussion point then, I see that the front door isn't intruded onto the access there. The rear door will be enclosed. There may be a gate coming onto it, but it's not going to be straight out of the house onto the access path. So I'm struggling to see why access would be an issue here, because Councillor said before, Councillor Frost, sorry. As we were saying before, there's lots of properties like this. You know, I live in a property 150 years old with more restricted access than that. So, thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. In weighing up the argument that's been put on both sides of this, from what I've heard so far, say the current occupant wanted to remove the garage and have access on the property to the back of the property. There's nothing to stop them doing that. They could take the garage down, drive the driveway further into the property and park around the back. That would still create a conflict with the back door. And there are lots of properties that I know of where the back door, or a front door for that matter, actually comes right out onto either a driveway, a road, or an access. The question of safety becomes one of, can you make the argument stick if you got as far as an appeal in front of an inspector? And there's no highways or safety issue at the moment that's presented, despite the concern that's genuinely been raised and quite legitimately been raised, that I think would hold water. The question becomes one of, is the property incongruous? And the argument we've had, it isn't. It's a bungalow. There are examples of it locally in streets away from this street. The balancing argument to that is, this would be the very first one in this immediate area that could well set the ball rolling for all the rest, because there's plenty of garden and plenty of those properties out the back of all the others. But you can't judge it on the back of that. You can only judge it on the red line that's in front of you and the application that we've got that's in front of us. So I'm just weighing up all those arguments, and I think at the moment I can't see a reason, aside from what the officers say, for it being incongruous, and I don't think even that holds water, to be perfectly honest.
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you for your indulgence. Just to say, this current property, and Councillor Harvey's point, you could knock it through and drive on. It would only be used by one family. There would be a second family in the back, and therefore the likelihood of conflict is probably just as is greater. That's all.
It's been moved for refusal. Is there a seconder for refusal? No. In that case, I'm sorry, Councillor Rattigan, your proposal falls. Is there anybody moving for approval? Councillor McCormick for approval, seconded by Councillor Court. Yep, thank you. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? And Councillor McCormick, can you clarify your reasons for approval? Sorry, I should have asked before we took the vote. I'm assuming it's a reversal of what's written. That has been approved. Bethan.
Thank you. So the application is approved, subject to some conditions. So that will be the approved plans, time, materials, biodiversity, compliance with the report, hours of construction, hours of operation, water efficiency standards, parking, refuse collection, cycle parking, a couple of nitrates conditions for the credits that they're purchasing, and noise mitigation due to the nearby railway line. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4, Plough Green, Bottle Lane, Hartley Whitney. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of a three-bed dwelling. The site was viewed by the committee, and I draw your attention to the update paper. During the course of the application, the scheme was amended and the overall bulk, mass and scale were reduced, and the dwelling was moved 7 metres away from the western boundary. The application is recommended for approval, subject to a legal agreement jointly with Woking and Borough Council to secure suitable alternative natural green space, and that's to mitigate against the impact on the Thames Valley Basin SPA. So the officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you. If we go to our first speaker, which is Mr. Fisher. Good evening, Mr. Fisher. You have 4 minutes, and I will remind you when you have 1 minute remaining. I think you'll find it's the right.
Lovely, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I live at Hartley House in what is a designated rural location with my wife Lucy, who's here. Also here are Mr. and Mrs. Hanger, who live in Hartley House Bungalow. And also my mother, Annie Fisher, is here, who lives over the road in Hartley Cottage. As a bit of background, my grandfather came out of retirement in 1939. General Sir Bertie Fisher, who was made General Officer Commanding-in-Chief Southern Command in 39, in effect de facto Commander of Defence of Southern England against imminent invasion in those dark days. What happened was that they actually created a new drive through the garden round to the back because of they would get more privacy. And this is for the various members of the chiefs of the defence staff. Churchill came, and it was rumoured the King also. We're very lucky, but unfortunately this privacy is now in peril. Our problem lies in the fact that the lie of the land, where the proposed house is going to be on the very top of the very tallest hill, which is going to overlook Hartley, its gardens and grounds. The street scene provided is immaterial and frankly disingenuous. The street scene required is not from Bottle Lane, but from Hartley Westbourne Lane. This is where the land rises sharply, and its footings will be almost at the top of our current wall, a Georgian wall that's been there for the best part of 200 years. Here the development will loom high over the lane, hugely over our said 7-foot Georgian wall, and over the surrounding countryside as far as the eye can see. Mr. and Mrs. Hanger live in the Grade 2 listed medieval Hartley bungalow. They've been very happy with their rural outlook within the Hartley House walled gardens. Now the development will look straight into their living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. The development will loom all over their garden, which faces east. The Hartley wall is listed, I should know. A section came down in the storm of last February and is still to be rebuilt due to heritage planning, having to use the same dated bricks, etc., lime mortar. This preserved wall encompasses our boundary and is only feet away from the developer's plot. Contrary to what has been stated in the proposal, Hartley has always had a working agricultural buildings and barns. It's remained entirely self-sufficient in all things, meat, grain, fruit and vegetables, well into the 1950s.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. The grain used to be winched up into the lofts. The milking old parlours are still there. The proposed element will not be in keeping with the village of Hartley, Westbourne, which is entirely ribbon. This will be cluster. The difference to me seems to be fundamental. It is its positioning further south, further from Bottle Lane, that will make it project over others. It will project over the walled gardens, project directly into the hangar's front room, project over every inch of Hartley, its gardens and grounds, will be visible from public footpaths. It will be also out of proportion with the village, where all the other buildings are of modest size and nature. The height, the architectural style, the use of materials has nothing in common with the village. which is predominantly made of Victorian and Georgian brick. For many hundreds of years, the village has been a place of peace and harmony, only for now this to affect our harmony. As it happens, the rebuilding of the Lister wall will cost a six-figure sum. For those of us who protect historic buildings, we would only hope that the authorities would help us protect their integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Fisher? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. And if we could have Mr. Lasseter and Tanya Dean, please. And good evening to you both. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the viewing panel for visiting the site on Friday to see the lie of the land that's been mentioned. Mrs. Dean is going to speak first. I'll say a few words afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. I am here to talk on behalf of my mother, Juliet Donald, who owns Plough Green House. She's unfortunately unable to attend this evening as she's midway through a chemotherapy cycle. My mother's lived at Plough Green House for 48 years. My brother and I both grew up there. Since my father died, she's continued to live there, but is rattling around in the house, wants to downsize to a modern house, while still being part of the home and the village that she loves. We hope this new dwelling will enable me and my young family to move into Plough Green House and therefore care for my mother by having her in such close proximity. Other than the objector we've just heard from, all the other objections are either connected to them or from outside of the village. We've received multiple messages for support from the villagers and other neighbouring properties expressing how much they like the design of the house and how they're very excited for her.
Thank you. I haven't written a speech, you'll be pleased to hear, Chairman. I commend the officer's report and just direct you to the 6 reasons for granting approval, all of which address the comments that were made by the objector. So I'll leave you to debate the issue and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Questions for the speakers? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. There was a couple of comments made with regard to closeness to the neighbour's property and to a wall. I just wondered if officers could explain that on the pictures.
I believe the neighbour who spoke is the one to the west as you look at it there. There is a wall out on the main road. I'm just wondering, there was some photos.
There is a location plan which you could sort of use.
So basically, where you see the red line up in the top right-hand corner, that's the site. It's the other side of the road. I believe there's a wall there.
On the left?
On the left, yeah.
Okay.
There is a wall there. I've seen the front house. It's not on there.
So is the property to the left there?
Yeah, yeah. So it's on the other side of the lane, that on the western side. It's around here.
Any more questions for officers? In that case, we go to debate. And if you don't mind, I'll start it off. I visited Mr. Fisher's house, must be give or take a year ago to the day. It was a cold day, and I looked at it from Mr. Fisher's garden. That was for the old plan, which is shown in blue on page 153 of your agendas. And I looked at that and I felt it was too big, I felt it was too close to the boundary, and I felt there were certainly overlooking issues. Since then, it's been moved, we're told, 7 metres. It's been made smaller and the design has changed. what we need to do, or you need to do tonight, is decide, is that enough, or is this still intrusive? Is it still causing overlooking? So, over to you. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, on site, I think we could gather that it was a substantial improvement with the movement of the dwelling further into the site and further down. And I didn't believe there was a huge visual impact upon the wider countryside or neighbouring homes and houses. I think it does meet our needs to provide good housing close to amenities, and I genuinely think this was, although outside the settlement boundary, was a proposal that could be supported moving forward. So I liked it, but I'll listen to my fellow councillors on their views.
Councillor Freeman.
As Councillor Rattigan said on the site visit, I really don't see a problem. I think it's far enough away from that wall and other neighbours that it won't really be a problem. I do think it's an improvement on the original scheme, and I'd be quite happy to approve it.
Been moved for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Court. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Yeah, Councillor Freeman, you did move it, didn't you? Yes. I was pretty sure you did. So, if there's no more debate, moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? And 11, 12, 11, and I will abstain. And I say I will abstain on that one. That has been approved. Officer to Sue.
Thank you, Chair. The application is approved subject to the conditions in the officer's report.
Thank you. It is 7:45. We'll have a 5-minute break. Stay out of that. I hadn't forgotten you. I think we're all back, so if we could settle down and continue. Right. Items 5 and 6 both relate to Brown's Farm, Borkhurst Road. The first one is planning application. The second one is the list of building consent. What I would like to do is do them both as one. So, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application list of building consent for the demolition of the existing rear extensions and their replacement with a two-storey rear extension. In addition to those proposals, this also includes the provision of a swimming pool to the south between the barn and the tennis court, an extension to the barn and an extension to the garden store. The main issue for consideration here is the scale and siting of the extension on the rear of the farmhouse, and that is the only area of concern that officers have. And you will see that in the reason for refusal. So the officer's recommendation is for refusal.
Thank you, Sue. If we could have our speakers, Mr. Downey and Mr. Dowling. Good evening to you both. As you are speaking on technically two separate applications, you have 8 minutes between you. How you use that is entirely up to you. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute left if we get that far. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Chair, members, officers. Brown's Farm has existed since the very late 16th century, albeit that successive owners have over all that time adapted it, refronted it, altered part, demolished part, extended it, all to fit in with the changing requirements of each generation. It hasn't been a farm for many years, nor a Quaker meeting house for over a century, but it has the potential to be an attractive country house. Unfortunately, little has been done to improve it since the Second World War, and its range of accommodation is now largely unsuitable and outdated to serve as a modern family home. The proposed extension takes the pressure for change off the listed building. It has been carefully designed to complement the listed building in terms of its form, materials, and details. It is confined to the rear of the house, and its design has been amended and its size reduced at the request of the previous conservation and case officer. Looking through the report, I see there are no objections on grounds of archaeology, biodiversity, flood risk, highways, impact on the character or appearance of the area, or impact on neighbouring properties. And no actual neighbours have objected, and neither has the parish council. I note in the report also that there are no objections to the proposed extension to the barn, or the shed, or for the proposed swimming pool. The only remaining objection, single objection, is for refusal, is that it is considered that the scale and siting of the extension would dominate the original building, causing harm. Well, I think consideration of matters of scale and siting are highly subjective. The scale has been reduced, both in terms of the extension's height and floor area. It is a substantial extension, but it's clearly subservient in scale to the original building. And an increase, not of doubling as it states in the report, but an increase of just over 50% on the existing footprint. The siting of the proposed extension has been carefully considered. We're preserving the original front unaltered and the sides of the building, locating the extension at the rear, thereby maintaining the historic visual appearance of the farmhouse in its countryside setting. As the report says, on page 163, The extension would reflect the style of the house property through the use of matching materials and detailing. And also, it is not considered that the proposed extension would cause harm to the wider character of the area. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, councillors, Brown's Farm is a beautiful historic house. Unfortunately, it has not been well maintained and is no longer fit for purpose. I want to breathe new life into it as my forever home and for future generations. I'm hoping to renovate both the house and the neighbouring barn. I want to upgrade the house to modern standards whilst maintaining its architectural integrity. I want to transform the unused barn to a home entertainment space, giving it relevance into the future. This will be my family home. It's an opportunity for me to create a haven for my family to enjoy and preserve the historical fabric of these wonderful buildings. My application actually follows a lapsed permission granted to the previous owners. But this one is more sympathetic to the original property and makes much better use of natural light. The proposed extension will preserve the historical character of the house as the front and side elevations are not being touched. It'll enhance the vista from the rear by removing a flat-roofed extension. It will complement the original building whilst being wholly subservient to it. It will create a better living space, add a much-needed further bedroom, and it will remedy the internal flow of the house. The changes will enhance the aesthetic appeal, the symmetry, environmental friendliness, and the functionality of the property, and make it relevant for modern living. I want to update, upgrade, and improve these beautiful house and barn, sympathetically, to preserve their history and ensure they can be enjoyed for many more years to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions for the speakers? Councillor Rattigan.
It's quite a lot to take in, if I'm really honest with you. This is a huge application if we count it all together. Had you thoughts of giving us it in small bits rather than one big application, or was that intended that you show us what you're going to do?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Rattigan. It's a great question. I think they all work in tandem and all together. If I can get planning permission for one bit, I need to consider the services, for example, of a building and the drainage area that will have to go on, and those all have to be done all at once. And if I'm trying to do one project from a cost perspective, it's far more economical to have somebody on site all at once doing the whole proposition than doing it piecemeal. So I'm sorry to burden you with this larger complication, but I hope you'll have the mindsight to see through that, and I hope it's not a problem.
Any more questions? Councillor Tomley.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. So, as you're going sympathetically, what you plan to sympathetically extend the property, are you looking at incorporating subtle low-cost energy solutions and such like?
Wholeheartedly. It's a question that vexes me at the moment as to what the best way of heating a proposition going forward. Obviously, the cost of gas is going to go up. We're not in the gas mains. Oils is going to go out of the window. I was chatting to somebody today. The advice I have been given so far is that ground source heat pump for the house, air source for the barn and the swimming pool, and additionally there's a cottage which I'm not doing anything that needs any planning permission, but that would be an air source heat pump as well. So I would try to future-proof the whole proposition. Obviously, I haven't gone down the line to any great extent in trying to understand the costing. I have actually had a costing of what a ground source heat pump would be, and that's out of date now given the level of inflation. But very definitely, I will be looking to use the most modern sensible proposition in terms of how to heat the system, the sewage drainage system, etc., will need to be reassessed. And as I said in my initial remarks, the house has not been maintained. It has had very little investment, I think Frank said, since the Second World War. And a lot of those sort of things have to be looked at, but I will take the best advice I possibly can to make it as future-proof as possible.
Any more questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Questions to officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, it is a stunning, beautiful building right in the middle of my ward. You know, whenever I go past and see, it always makes me smile, okay, reminding me just how beautiful some parts of Hampshire are. However, it is Grade 2 listed, okay. If it wasn't Grade 2 listed, okay, what would the, and looking at the size of the proposed extension, what would be allowed under permitted development rights?
I think there's so many different categories, I wouldn't be able to sum up what could be built on there and what couldn't be. Particularly if because it's Grade 2 listed, obviously that limits what you can do on there. But if it wasn't Grade 2 listed, there's a substantial amount of things you could do on there, but I won't be able to summarise that all in terms of, you know, roof alterations, extensions,
Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions for the officers? Councillor Hussey.
So if you look, so the plan that's before you there, so that's the ground floor, and you can see the top part of the building, that's all new, taking away some elements, and then there's 2-storey elements on both sides of that as well. So if you then go on to the, and then you can, so that's all new. So there's small bits that will come off, but then you've got the 2-storey rear extensions projecting out the back. So if you come to the elevations, so the top elevation there is the front, which doesn't change. The rear elevation, it's easier if I just get up. So this whole section here is new. So that's the existing property at the front there.
Okay. Any more questions for officers? In that case, debate. Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Rattigan, followed by Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. This certainly was a site worthy of viewing. So I think my summing up is when you approach the property along its drive, you see the elevation of the old farmhouse. And it's actually largely, shall I say, intact. It hasn't been messed with. As you go round to the back, it's probably being polite to say it's been messed with, but it's a real hodgepodge mixture of styles, of patchwork brick, of different windows, of, oh, there we are, look at that, flat roof, bits of cat slide roof. Yes, it's got some sort of character, but it doesn't, in my opinion, do it justice, and thankfully you can't see it from the road. Now, to that end, looking at the potential extension, it is quite large that's being proposed. I think it's actually, again, not going to harm its view from the road, but I certainly buy the line of making this house, because we did have the benefit of looking inside, of bringing it up to a standard for modern day living, but preserving the actual plot and its scenery, its setting. And as from the officer's report, there isn't really an issue with this. It's the bulk as being the significant reason that I'm quite encouraged that someone would want to invest something to look after a property like this, to maintain in practical terms what they can to allow it to carry on its future, preserve a lot of its past, and I think it's quite sympathetic. And certainly when you look at the houses around, this is actually quite small, but then it's not actually in a street scene with its neighbours. So I'll leave it at that at this stage, but that's my 5 pennyworth.
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. And it was good to see Scott looking at the cost implications of everything. I commend the applicant for that. Rightly, we need to focus on the back, and frankly, it is higgledy-piggledy. There's a toilet that essentially, with a single-skinned wall out into that area. That is not what I would expect in a house that is grade 2 listed. We have to take on board that they've made one application to both stretch our brains and our thoughts, but because there is, as the applicant and his agent said, there are things that we would have approved anyway. The upgrade of the barn, allowance for a swimming pool, allowance for the heating to be air-sourced heat or ground-sourced. I think all of those things are hugely commendable. So we come down to, is the bulk too much? Does it dominate the house? But in my view, is that it doesn't. And the main facade, the facade that you see coming from my village of Ashford Hill onto the house is retained. There is no touching of the sides. So you are going to get the best of what is there and an improvement of the poorly maintained and poorly designed previously. With the time that I've taken to review it and the site visit, which I think was very informative actually, because the bus travelled away from it and you could look back and think, what would your street scene be then? And I think, frankly, it would be a better outcome than what is currently there. And so I am happy to move a recommendation for approval based upon that the bulk scale size are in keeping with a house of tremendous validity, and we need in our borough to make sure that we get the right extensions, right changes to these homes, and I think this probably falls on the side that it is acceptable. So I move an approval.
Been moved for approval. Is there a seconder?
I'd second the motion. Okay.
Councillor Tomlin, thank you. I've got 2 more speakers. That's at the moment. That's Councillor Faulkner and myself. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, being from the ward of Evingar, I see an awful lot of grade 2, grade 1 castles, etc., etc. And there's always a sense of frustration that the listed building regulations often apply to an era that's long since gone. You know, the modern world, whether we love it or hate it. I think everyone deserves to have adequate heating, internet access, etc., etc. So some of the ancient protections, I think, should be swept away. And just because it's old doesn't mean to say it's wonderful. You know, come on! You missed an opportunity there. Yeah. Yeah, so this looks a very sensitive approach to bringing a property up to the modern era, and all the accoutrements that go with it would make it a really fabulous place. So I would be very happy to support the approval.
Thank you. I don't like it, I'm sorry. I've no problem with the barn, I've no problem with the pool. And the house, there's absolutely no doubt about it, it does need something to it with it. It is hodgepodge, it's untidy. The old extensions aren't pretty. Is what before us the right answer? I don't think it is. I think we lose the legibility of the property, we lose the historic footprint. I think the scale could be, you could have an extension of that scale if it was done in a different way, but to put something right across and lose sight of that entire back wall is wrong. It's as simple as that. So you all know which way I'm going to vote. I think we've got Councillor Harvey, and then we will go to the vote. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I note the debate that members are having and the direction that you're going in on this in the conversation that's been had, and I don't disagree with you. However, on page 178, I do think it's important that if we're going to go down that road, that we acknowledge that the historic environment objection, the historic buildings and places objection, the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings objection, and the Council for British Archaeology objection are on this application, and we shouldn't ignore them. So in weighing all of this up, I think we need to do due consideration to the fact that all of those are objecting to this for the reasons they are objecting to it. That doesn't take away from the argument that's been had about whether it's relevant and the context in which it's been set by the speakers and by colleagues. But they are important objections that we shouldn't ignore. It's worth in our debate saying that we have at least said them and considered them in coming to a judgment.
Councillor Rattigan, could I have your reasons for approval, please?
Thank you, Chair. It is that the proposed extension, by virtue of its scale and siting, do not dominate the original home, and fundamentally keep intact the historic listing of the building. It is noted that the Parish Council did not object on this, and they are fairly loud on objections. So I hope those reasons for approval are sufficient.
Been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11. Yeah. Can we have hands up again, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And those against? 2. Thank you. Yep. That is approved. Sue, isn't it?
If I can just go through conditions. So the conditions would be a pre-commencement one with regards to materials and joinery detail, a condition regarding biodiversity, referencing it to the outline method statement that was submitted, and also parking as well.
Thank you. That was the planning permission. We now need to basically go through the process again. Second vote on the listed building consent. Could I have a proposer for that?
I'm once again happy to propose that.
And seconded by Councillor Tomlin. Moved and seconded for approval on the list of building consent. Those in favour? And I assume, and those against? Exactly the same. Thank you. Sue?
It's subject to the same conditions as before, time, plans, materials, biodiversity and parking.
Thank you. Item number 7, Chancellor's Barn, Trade Street, Walton Hill. Bethan.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a full planning application at Chancellor's Barn, Trade Street in Walton Hill for the erection of a 2-bedroom detached accessible property in the existing side garden with a new access to the front. The application was previously refused at committee for overdevelopment and the lack of amenity space. The proposal has made some changes. These are listed on page 201 of the agenda paper. The amenity land for the existing property has not altered, which we've recognised. However, there is a space of 10 metres between the property and the proposed boundary, which is in accordance with our design and sustainability SPD. It is also the office's view that the development would not result in significant or demonstrable harm to warrant refusal in this instance, given the number of benefits which are listed on page 213 of the agenda. The applicant has, since the preparation of the agenda, provided a photo showing the recent planting of the privet hedge to the front, adjacent to the highway. It should be noted that the fence doesn't have permission and a separate application will follow for this. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the report in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. And if we could have our speaker, Ms Jackson, please. Good evening to you. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chairman, members. My name's Lisa Jackson and I'm the planning agent for this application. When I was approached to consider the previous refusal on this site, whilst I believed it was an acceptable proposal, I recognised that there were objections locally and that there were 2 main concerns of this committee. I therefore suggested to the applicant that this was a good opportunity to address those concerns and create a solution for this site that should find more support. The first of those concerns was regarding character, and to respond to that, the design was revised as follows. Revised elevations with a more vernacular cottage-style development, a simple traditional pitch with full gables and a narrow span, recessed cottage-style small pane windows with first-floor windows at eaves level, a simple porch with a pitched roof, reduced height of the dwelling by 600 millimetres. The position of the dwelling was moved forward so that the gap at the rear is 1.5 metres, which is to match Chancellor's Barn adjacent. The turntable was removed from the application because this was not required by highway authorities and it was seen as urbanising by objectors. The Velux roof lights on the front elevation were removed to assist with assimilation in the street scene, and slimline in-roof solar panels are proposed on the rear elevation to ensure sustainability of the new dwelling. Members' other concern in relation to the character was scale issues, and to assist members, I can confirm that I examined this issue in detail and compared the application scheme directly against the other dwellings this side of Trade Street, which incidentally is of a very mixed character. From my measurements, I can confirm the proposed house has a 16% site coverage. This is the 4th lowest percentage on this side of the street. The gap between this dwelling and its neighbour is 16.8 metres, and only 2 dwellings on the street have wider gaps. The footprint of the proposal is the smallest on the street, but it's not the smallest plot. 2 dwellings have smaller plot sizes, and incidentally, they both have higher percentage plot coverages. 6% higher and 11% higher. And the setback from the road is, again, not the tightest on this street. So this demonstrates objectively that the proposal is not out of character in terms of scale. Last time, members also felt that Chancellor's Barn would be left within adequate amenity space. The Council's SPD on garden size requires 60 square metres minimum, but this proposal has 120 square metres, so it is double that minimum amenity requirement. So complying with the standard means that refusal on that point couldn't be sustained. Planning decisions must be made on a balanced assessment and using all the objective evidence, and your officers have made that professional and balanced assessment based on all the policies of the plan and the thorough review of all the material considerations in this case, including the new recently adopted neighbourhood plan.
You have 1 minute remaining.
I would ask you that you look at this proposal in the round and accept this provides a well-designed, vernacular-style, sustainable and accessible small dwelling to assist the applicant to downsize and adapt to use as a lifetime home, a need identified in the new neighbourhood plan with a specific policy and support. and it is located in the settlement boundary. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Got it. Thank you. Questions for the Speaker? Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned there was a turntable here for the two parked cars, and you've took that out. Can you let us know why you took that out? Because I think last time it came up, the access to the road was an issue.
Yes, the reason that was taken out was because the Highway Authority said it was not necessary and they wouldn't raise an objection if the turntable was removed. And because other people felt it was an urbanising characteristic, and there aren't others in the road, it was felt it was better to remove it.
Okay. Any other questions? No, thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Hussey. Can you put your microphone on, please?
The Parish Council comments, para C, on page 197. Can the officers confirm or tell me what is the nearest proximity of the house to the road? Here it claims it's only 1 metre from the road.
I can just measure it. Hold on.
So, Councillor Hussey, whilst the officers are just looking for that particular measurement, I mean, I think the comment being made there is obviously in relation to just one specific corner. I think that's the Parish Council's comments. It's not about the... Oh, I see what you mean. You want confirmation that it is 1 metre in that location, sorry.
Whilst they're sorting that out, are there any other questions? That's the whole job, asking awkward questions. No, no other questions.
Sorry, was it to the hedge or the highway you wanted to know? Oh. Yeah, so from where their planting is, so if you just get that photo up from, can you just get the photo of the front hedge with the fence? Yeah. So to where the fence is and the planting sort of, you can see at the bottom, that is showing as 1.3 metres on their site plan. That's from the closest part, so that's from the western edge of the western corner, and then from the corner adjacent to the parking access, it's 3.3 metres to the fence line. Okay.
If there are no more questions, debate. Sorry, questions, Councillor Gaskell.
Sorry, Chair. I was just looking at the requirement for storage facilities for bicycles and probably bins. I just can't see where that would be. I wonder if officers could elaborate.
It is going to be a fully accessible and adaptable home, and let me just see them. So we've got condition 9, which requires them to provide provision for within its curtilage for cycle storage for the requirement in our SPD. So two long stay cycle bays.
So I guess that will be dealt with in building regulations rather than in this meeting.
It's just a condition that they have to provide that on site. It's a standard one we put on for single dwellings.
My concern is I can't see where it would be.
It can just go in a garden lockable shed, something like that on site.
Okay, you happy with that? Okay. In that case, debate. Councillor Harvey.
Go on, I'll get this one on for once. When the application was rejected previously, for all the reasons given, and you then look at what the applicant has now done and how the approach is to change and to adapt, I think they've actually been very reasoned, and I cannot see a reason to reject this. I can't see a reason to object, and I would move approval as per the recommendation because of that. And the applicant has actually attempted to listen to what the committee previously debated around the table, and you've got to give them credit for that in terms of trying to, and it does go a significant way.
Move for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tomlin. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to second the application. Thank you.
Okay. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And those against? Abstentions? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. That is approved. Sue? No? Or Bethan, sorry, whoever.
Thank you, Chairman. So that the application is approved as per the officer's recommendation, subject to the conditions at the end of the report. Thank you.
Item 8, land at St Michael's Close, North Waltham. Sue?
Thank you, Chair. This is an application to vary two conditions. Conditions 1, which is the plans on the previous approved TDC, and condition 15, which related to connecting to a packaged treatment plant. The reason it's before you as a committee, there's not enough objections and it hasn't been called in, but because condition 15 was imposed when the TDC was approved by committee, it was imposed by the committee. That's why we brought it back before you. So our recommendation is, with regards to condition 1, the plans that would now be approved were ones that you considered at the committee. It's just that we referred to the wrong revision number in the condition, so it's just rectifying that, and it's a plan that you've already considered as part of the previous approval for the TDC. Condition 15, the previous TDC application, when it was before you, the officer's recommendation and the statutory consultee's recommendation was that it was connecting to the main sewers. The committee put on the requirement for a packaged treatment plant. As part of this application, the agent has submitted details to show that they can connect to main sewers, and there's no objection from the statutory consultees as before. Therefore, the officer's recommendation is that, again, this time round, that the condition be amended so that you connect to the main sewer. So the officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Sue. If we could have our speaker, Mr Young. Good evening, Mr Young. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. As Mr Tarbutt has indicated, we're only here because of unnecessary wording in the foul drainage condition that was added to permission 2893 TDC, inserted by members at the 12th of October committee for the package treatment plant, and contrary to what officers' advice then, that in the committee's view, the treatment plant was the only appropriate solution for foul drainage. Some helpful context here. There was a previous TDC with a marginally different built form granted on appeal and with a costs award against the council. That permission is still extant and is so until May of next year, and that was approved on the basis of mains foul. That TDC had a slightly different form of nutrient neutrality mitigation. It was on adjacent land secured by an undertaking. You'll recall when we were here in October, prior to that committee, Basingstoke and Dean had agreed to take part in a nitrate neutrality scheme administered by Eastleigh, and that was incorporated into the decision to application 2893. The credit requirement has been determined in line with Natural England guidance. It depends on the number of bedrooms in the units, and the calculation assumes mains connection. You've seen a copy of Southern Water's plan showing the location of mains foul in the vicinity. I've got a large printed version of the same if you need to see it. The sewers to 28 and 30 St Michael's Close run in front of 26 and 24, and there is a newer manhole in the northeast corner of 28 with connection to 30. From that new node, we estimate that H1 is about 25 metres and H2 is about 35 from that new node, and these are acceptable distances for new mains drains, especially when there's more than one dwelling proposed, as is the case here. National planning guidance and building regulations indicate the wastewater hierarchy. Septic tanks and packaged treatment plants may only be considered if it can be clearly demonstrated that discharging into a public sewer is not feasible. I emphasise those words. Main foul are available to serve the units. Connection is feasible. And connection is an absolute right, regardless of whether there are capacity issues in those mains. But the Southern Water response to the application does not raise any capacity issues. The credits have been bought on the back of the October decision, its flaws notwithstanding. And your officers have had proof of that. They also have proof that those credits can be transferred from the existing permission to one that would arise from this, from any discussion tonight. My client is still able, until middle of April, to lodge an appeal to address the issues that were introduced by councillors in October. This application we're discussing tonight is a reasonable alternative to that option. I hope you recognise the points within this and your officer's presentation and support the recommendation and support it unaltered. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions to the Speaker? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, you mentioned this nearest connection, but you used the word new node. Can you tell us the date of or the history of why it's a new node?
So the plan that you've got there was produced in 2017 before number 28 and 30 were built, just to the south of where that blue circle is. The new node is in the corner of number 28. It's approximately 50 metres from the node that's within that blue circle, the southernmost of those new nodes. So the existing dwellings that are already present beyond the bounds of that, which were constructed after that 2017 plan were put there, is further away from the sewer network than the new dwellings would be from the new node that was put in to facilitate those existing dwellings. Does that clarify?
Yeah, sorry, that was 2017, did you say?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Sorry, the date was 2017 that it was
installed? That plan was 2017, but the two dwellings that are now built and have been built since are obviously not shown on that plan.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? No? In that case, debate? No debate. Councillor McCormick.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for it? Councillor Court. Thank you. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? All except 112. And
Thank you, Chair, that the application is approved subject to the conditions and the officer's report.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a retrospective full planning application at Overton Recreation Centre for the variation of Condition 5 of 16/00903/FUL to allow floodlights to be used at additional times. There are 6 floodlights measuring 15 metres in height and used around the existing football pitch. This current application seeks to rectify the previous requested hours to allow the lighting to be used during the original times as approved, which is 7 to 10 p.m. between the months of September to April, and in addition seeks the extension of use of lighting between the 1st of May to the 30th of September between the hours of 8 p.m. to midnight, but for only 6 events during that period. It is noted that each floodlight has 14 bulbs, but only 1 bulb in each floodlight are proposed to be used during these additional 6 events between 8 and 12 during those months to minimise the impact on the residents in the local area. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions, whereas worth noting out that condition 2 restricts the additional hours for only 6 events in that time period and the use of 1 bulb in each floodlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethan. And if we could have our speaker, Mr. Moss, please. And good evening, Mr. Moss. You have 4 minutes, and I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I speak for myself and on behalf of a number of neighbours who wrote objecting to this application. First, we'd like to say that it would be nice to have some support from one of our local borough councillors, but this is impossible as 2 of them are compromised being a trustee and a treasurer respectively of Overton Recreation Centre, the ORC. We're hoping that members of the Development Control Committee can be more supportive in understanding the concerns that neighbours to the site have. Condition 5, which the applicants seek to vary, was put in due to the adjacent SSSI to minimise harm to protected species and also to protect the amenities of occupants of nearby properties. The applicants support their application by using the good old cards of health and safety, security, promotion of community spirit, funding of sports facilities for all, which are clearly convenient supporting arguments. We do not have an issue with village events. These are not very frequent. But the use of 6 15-metre tall floodlights to enable people attending private events to leave the premises safely is total overkill and does adversely affect neighbours, and officers acknowledge this in their report. The original planning application cited that lights would be obscured or partially obscured by trees and hedges around the site. Since the floodlights have been installed, the RC have sought permission and felled 17 trees around the site, which is probably around about 30% of them, and also removed virtually all of the hedging on the north boundary of the site, which also blocked a significant amount of light spillage. The phrase only 6 events comes up throughout the report. The reality is all these events will be at weekends, particularly in the period June through to August, so that's 2 events a month. The application mentions village events, the Scarecrow Festival and Sheep Fair are quoted. These only happen every 4 years, so the remainder of these events are likely to be private events, i.e. weddings and parties, where the support arguments of benefits to the community, etc., are not really relevant. We have concerns that the extension to time that floodlights can be used will increase noise nuisance, as the events will happen out on the sports field that's now being illuminated. It's extremely unlikely there will be events without loud music, so in reality what you get is a floodlit disco until midnight on a Saturday night. We believe that this does affect the amenity of neighbours. The baffles that have been installed on the lights are not effective. No one has ever checked the light spillage within the supplier's specification. When all the lights are on, you could easily sit in my front garden and read a book at 10 o'clock at night. During the football season, for which the floodlights were supposedly erected, neighbours normally have their curtains and windows shut, so the effect of the lights and noise is restricted. During the summer, it's not unreasonable to expect that on a Saturday night you can have the curtains and windows open. You can't if you have a floodlit disco next door. From a biodiversity point of view, Condition 5 sought to protect species associated with the river and its surroundings, in particular to protect foraging bats during the bat season, which runs from April to October. The biodiversity officer now thinks that as it's only 6 events per year, that floodlighting in this season is okay.
You have 1 minute remaining.
For it not to be okay. There are concerns that there is slow creep of planning activity on the ORC Bridge Street site. Last year, the cricket club applied for planning permission to replace a shed with a new wooden structure. It was stated in their application that it would be used for players, parents and spectators to sit in during cricket games and training. The structure has now become a clubhouse that has an alcohol licence, food hygiene rating and is available to hire for private functions. The ORC are very good at stretching a planning application. Finally, we ask this question. Has the planning officer or members of the Development Control Committee been to the site at night to see the effect of the floodlights? We're unsure as to how you can make a decision on this application if you haven't witnessed the effect. We would therefore suggest that the correct course of action would be either to refuse the application or defer the decision until a suitable site visit has been arranged when the lights are on at night.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Young? Sorry, Mr. Moss. Reading the wrong thing. No? No questions? Thank you very much. If we could have Mr. Devereux, please. Good evening, Mr. Devereux. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow members. I should first like to make it clear that the subject of this application was originally approved by the planning officer, but an error was made on the notice of approval. The period dates sought, April to September, were inexplicably reversed to September to April, so this is a fresh application which we've made. As the applicant, Overton Recreation Centre is unique. It's a registered charity of nearly 60 years run by volunteers providing sports and recreation facilities in Overton of the type normally provided by a parish council. We have over 12 clubs with more than 24 teams using our facilities and some 1,700 members and 3,500 monthly users. However, maintaining and improving facilities to provide affordable sport can be challenging in these circumstances. Limited use of the facilities at our Bridge Street Recreation Ground brings in much needed fundraising for the ORC, affiliated clubs and good causes. Overton has a great tradition of community events. I should clarify that what is sought is additional lighting purely to permit safe exit of people and simple clearing up at the end of each fundraising event. As events can end at varying times, we need some flexibility in the period sought. In practice, additional lighting will be used for up to an hour, and then only a maximum of 6 lamps out of the available 14 will be used. I must stress that the permitted use of additional lighting is not sought or never was intended to be for the whole duration of any event. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the Speaker? Sorry, it's for questions from councillors, not from visiting people. I've got a question. You said the purpose is for people leaving events rather than, you know, a game of rugby or anything, and obviously you're only putting one light on in each set, so it's not going to be floodlit, it's going to be illuminated, would be a more accurate way of describing it. But I'm looking at the plan on page 292. Strangely enough, that's the one. I'm taking a guess that the red dots are where the light's going to be. Why are we lighting the whole field, or talking about lighting the whole field, not just the sort of the footpaths and the area immediately around the sports pavilion?
We're not, Mr. Chairman, we're not actually seeking to do that. We're seeking just to actually have, wherever we need to clear up, wherever we need to direct people to actually leave the event, to actually have those lights on them. We're not actually seeking to actually have all the lights on at any one time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Court.
Evening. I'm just wondering, what time do your events actually generally finish?
Typically around 11:30.
That's 11:30 in the evening? Yes. And then you'll clear up for half an hour after that, so it's midnight?
That's correct.
Thank you. No more questions. Thank you very much. And if we could have Councillor Williams, please. Good evening, Councillor Williams, and you have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seek your support for this application. I should make clear that I am no longer a trustee of Overton Recreation Centre, and I resent the suggestion that I am. I believe it not to be unreasonable, these proposals. They're aimed at health and safety concerns and the beneficial element for the wider community. in supporting community events and raising much needed funds. I am mindful of the concerns expressed by objectors, but I should make clear that this is not a rerun of the arguments rejected when the original approval for floodlighting was made in 2016. It is genuinely directed at health and safety issues arising from the exit from events and ensuring that there's need for clearing up. In practice, lights will be used for up to a maximum of an hour. And please note that because events take place at varying times, there is a need for some flexibility in the times specified. But I believe the Overton Recreation Centre should work collaboratively with local neighbours to make sure that they're aware of what's proposed and they can voice ideas so that we can minimise the impact on neighbours. The point has already been made. That location map shows the position of the 6 columns that have lighting, but the proposal, there are 14 lamps in all. The proposal is to use a maximum of 6 lamps. And we're also respectful in relation to the concern from objectors about events not being community events. And I understand the ORC will be dropping after this year, if this approval goes forward, that wedding events shouldn't be held any longer on the site. I note that no objections from biodiversity, environmental health, historic environmental health, and I also note that Overton Parish Council did not object. I should point out that Overton Parish Council mission includes support for nurturing a strong community spirit, promoting culture, leisure and sports opportunities, and to foster the health and well-being of parishioners. I believe this matches the approach that the charity Overton Recreation Centre take, and I believe that the more practical solution in supporting community events is to use the existing capability in a limited and controlled way. Previously, safe exits were provided by diesel-powered mobile tower lights of the type that you often see at night time on roadworks. This was noisy, costly to hire, and set huge logistical challenges in manoeuvring and bringing these machines to the site.
You have 1 minute remaining.
So it's much better to use the existing lighting capability. I think this application has identified the need for better communication between the Overton Recreation Centre and the neighbours, and I hope that that is something that can be readily approved and move forward. I urge you to support the application.
Thank you. Questions? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Gaskell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Am I right in thinking that these events are actually governed by licensing committee, and the permission for what times they start and finish will be decided by them? So really, effectively, all we're deciding here is whether we can have lighting for an event that's been decided elsewhere.
Yes, yes.
Councillor Court.
Are issues to do with lighting like this actually covered by the Environmental Protection Act?
The biodiversity officers reviewed the lighting and raised no objections to this development in terms of the planning application. There are other legislations in terms of backlighting that they need to follow, but the biodiversity officers reviewed that, would have picked anything up like that if he saw it as an issue.
Many thanks.
Any more questions for officers? In that case, debate. Councillor McCormick.
Move the recommendation, Chair.
Moved by Councillor McCormick, seconded by Councillor Harvey. Anybody else want to speak to it? No? Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I make that. Those against? 1. And that's everybody. That is approved. Bethan.
Thank you, Chairman. So that application is approved following the officer's recommendation and and is subject to conditions listed at the end of the report and the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I said we'd finish at 9 o'clock. It's 1 minute to, so I think I won there. And thank you to the officers for all their hard work going into this. Thank you. And good night. Should have had a sleep,